Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Hello, sir. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm good, dear. I'm good. Wonderful. We'll start off the session. So, firstly, I'll tell everyone about Prachi. So, she's a wonderful student of ours. She has secured All India rank 16 in Indian Forest Services 2023 examination. So, she has been preparing simultaneously for both civil services as well as forest services. On top of that, she has secured second highest marks in English paper. Along with that, she's among the top 5 scorers in forestry paper. So that is commendable here, right? So everyone, I request you all kindly maintain calm. Let her, share her experiences, and then you can shoot your questions at her. Okay. So I assure you, all your doubts will definitely get resolved today. Okay. So Prachi, we can very well start off the session here.
Thank you, sir, for introducing me. I'll just share my screen and then get started. Hello, everyone. So firstly, I would like to thank you all for taking out time to join this session. I will try my best to ensure that we are able to pick some important things, given it's only 20 days before our exam. Although Aman sir has just given a brief introduction about me, I'll mention that this was my third attempt in the Indian Forest Services examination and the first means that I was writing. So I think a lot of things that I will be telling about the forestry optional might be relevant for those of you who are writing their very first means or even the very second means. Apart from that, I've just mentioned my marks in forestry and English optionals, where I was able to score decent marks. So I will be starting with giving a brief strategy of what can be done in the remaining 20 days. I'll not be going to the basics. Like as of now, I assume that the one round of syllabus would have been covered from your end. So we will only be focusing on what can be done in the next few days. So as per my understanding, there are these 4 pillars of preparation for the optional that need to be targeted right now. We will be starting with forestry since I assume that most of you would be having it as an optional. The first thing, the very important thing that helped me secure good marks in forestry was a very solid revision strategy. I focused a lot on revision, and there are various elements of my revision strategy which I would like to share with you. In addition to that, we will be discussing what all practice I did and like what sort of an attitude I maintained right before my exam and during the exam. So directly moving on to the tips to revise forestry optional effectively. So the very first thing that I did was that I created a detailed outline for both the papers. And so it was sort of an index, but a very detailed one. For example, I'll just zoom in here. And you can see that for the paper 1, the first chapter, the second chapter, third chapters are covered entirely here. We will move to the third slide first. Yeah, here. Yeah, so as I was mentioning that there are 5 basic pillars, I will not be covering the first one since I'm assuming that most of you would have covered one round of your syllabus by now. In the last 20 days, we need to focus a lot on revision, practice, and some things related to maintaining the right attitude. So I believe that the reason why I was able to score well in forestry optional was that I focused a lot on revision. So I had the entire syllabus sort of imprinted in my head, and I was able to write well with facts, scientific names, figures with confidence in the exam. So I think that is one reason which paid off during the exam. So can we move to the next slide? Yeah. So I have listed down some of the things that I did which were different uh, in terms of revision. So the first thing that I was talking about previously was creating a very detailed outline. So I know that the syllabus can be a bit overwhelming for all of us, given that we are studying it for the very first time, or even those who are appearing for the mains. It can be a lot. And most of the times what happens is that after we read the first few chapters, we are not able to recall what we studied in the beginning. So for that, I created an index sort of thing, which you can see in the image that I have put here. So for every chapter, I wrote down the headings and subheadings. Now, this helped me in two different ways. The first one was that it helped me to recall actively on a daily basis. So, for example, in the first chapter, as I have mentioned, forest definition and then forest classification, I kept this page in front of me and then I would ask questions to myself. So, what is the definition of forest? And then I would recall it in my head. Similarly, moving on to the next bit, so how can the forest be classified? So this was basically some pointers to guide me to recall actively. And by the end of it, I had like everything really clear in my head. Additionally, how this outline helped me was that while I was attempting the papers, I had a very clear understanding of what content is there in which chapter. And so I was able to frame my answers very nicely. So if they are asking about certain, like let's say certain instrument in the forest mensuration chapter, I knew that in that chapter there are various other equipments that are mentioned, various other instruments. So I was able to like in my answer, I was able to compare it with the others and then like frame my answer comprehensively. I knew exactly where this question is coming from, which unit and like which subheading in that chapter. So this really helped me because since we are studying for history for a very short duration, it is difficult that we have such in-depth understanding of what is there in which chapter and how we need to write the answers. So this is one thing which I did differently, and I did not uh, make it very extensive or very long. These were just 20 pages for each paper, and I even used them as my very short notes to revise before the examination. Then the second thing which helped me was my short notes. So here in forestry, unlike the civil services mains, the introduction is mostly comprised of definitions. And by definitions, I mean like being very specific and being very scientific. You could even be asked to write a definition of a tree, and like what the common people would write will be different than what you as the forest services aspirants should write. So what I did was I extracted all the definitions from both paper one and paper two. And these were around 50, 60 definitions for each paper, writing down the definition of tree, increment, forestry. And I revised them on a daily basis so that whenever a question was asked, I had an instant introduction ready in my head. And since it was very precise, I'm sure that the paper checker would have also liked that fact. So I believe that this is something which like all of us should be doing, being very precise with the definitions. The second thing which I did was I also extracted the scientific names and facts at one place. So this was again a 10-pager document that I created where I mentioned different species. For example, the frost hardy species, the drought resistant species. And there I would write down three, four examples each, or like mangroves and cold deserts are very like favorite topics of UPSC. So I noted them down at one place and then I would again revise them on a daily basis. So these are like three, four documents of 10, 10, 15 pages that I created. And then what I would do is that every morning in like 1 or 2 hours, I would pick one document and revise it entirely. And when I say that I revised it entirely, I was not going through the document. I was basically recalling it actively or just like keeping my notes closed and then writing down things on my own, sort of a scribbling thing that I was doing. Uh, Another thing that I did for revision of forestry was I created certain audio notes for myself. So, if you have carefully observed, there are certain chapters like forest legislation and forest economics, where in the reference material that we have, lot of details are given, lot of facts are there. So what I would do is, for example, in forest economics, there is a different valuation technique that is mentioned and it is explained in 4-5 pages. So to save time, what I did was I read it once, I understood it, and then in like 30 seconds, I would summarize it in my own words and also record it at the same time. So this helped me save time in the end, that I would just listen to my own audio notes, and since they were summarized by me, it was in very simple language and I was able to like retain it in my head. I did the same with forest legislations part, because in this part we have a lot of facts that need to be remembered and we need to be precise. Like in the 1927 Act, what provisions were there, or 1980 or 2006 Forest Rights Act. So I just summarized them in an audio note and I would listen to them again and again. Even when I went for my walks or when I was outside, when I was not feeling like reading. So for sections like these, maybe this can be a helpful strategy for some of you. Now coming to this very important question that you asked, that how do we remember the scientific names? So firstly, we need to understand that forestry is a technical optional and marks will be rewarded only if you are very precise and only if you mention the scientific names properly. There are a few things that you need to remember, that scientific names need to be written in a certain format, like first, the for the first name, the starting alphabet needs to be capitalized. Second, it does not need to be, and then you need to underline it. So these are certain things that you have to remember. Like you cannot afford to miss them, because the people who will be checking your answer sheets are experts in forestry, and if they notice that you are making like mistakes like these, just basic nomenclature you're not aware, then you will be penalized, or and your impression that this person has not studied forestry in depth will come out very soon. So that is something which we don't want. Apart from that, another difficulty which my friends also faced was that most of the times we are just glancing through the material or just reading through them, and we feel that we know them or we will be able to replicate in the exam. But especially for scientific names, it might not happen. And like we need to be very careful that we are writing the right spelling. So for this, what I did was I used to speak out the names. So when we are speaking out, we tend to be more careful about what the spelling is. For example, the Pinus roxburghi species that is there. In Roxburghi, there is a double I, which we don't want to miss, because, like, again, the people who are checking will come to know in the first instance that you don't know and you are just writing like that. So we need to be very precise with that. Similarly, there are certain species like Casuarina equisetifolia. Now, this is such a big name. If you're just reading and you feel that you'll write it directly in the exam, that might not happen with most of you. So I used to like speak out these names in my room. For example, if I was revising and if I like just give myself a question that Prachi, name 5 mangrove species that are there, then I would properly name them. Or if you're not wanting to speak them out, a better strategy would be to write them down without actually looking in your notes. So I am just stressing on this fact because we want to write the scientific names in the exam and we don't want to mess up with the spellings or anything. So just be very sure about that. So, like you can pick one or two or any of the elements of these revision strategies. These worked for me last year and might work for you as well. Uh, can we move to the next slide now? Yeah, coming to the practice that I did. So, so my focus was mainly on revising a lot. And every morning I would slot down 2 hours where I would revise different documents. So let's say definitions I revised, or the scientific names I revised, or the outline I revised. So when I actually sat down to practice or brainstorm the PYQs, I realized that most of the things were in my head and I did not need a lot of practice. So my focus remained on PYQs. I analyzed the PYQs thoroughly. I figured out that there are some favorite areas of the commission, like mangroves, coal desert, as I mentioned, working plan will be one. So I focused on those areas more. Then, in addition to that, I also like sat down for 3 hours where I would pick up the PYQs and brainstorm, write an introduction or what points, what keywords I would be mentioning in the exam. I also did that practice, and I did that to a point till I gained confidence that yes, I remember the different aspects of an answer, or I was able to write down within the time frame. I could not practice a lot of full length tests, but that is entirely up to how much time you have remaining. But again, I would stress that for forestry, revision and active recall is something that should not be compromised at any cost. And practice can be done basis whatever gives you confidence in the like in the practice stage. Then the coming to the next pillar, which is what should be done just before the exam. So I believe that it is very important to have a clear strategy of what you are going to revise when. By this, I mean that just a day before the exam, you need to be clear that these are the topics which you keep forgetting and which you need to revise. And even between the two exams or even in the morning of the exam, you need to be clear if there are certain scientific names that you need to revise. So it will be advisable that you create a plan for yourself depending on how much time you have already spent on certain areas. Have a very clear strategy because it's this optional has a lot of things that need to be remembered, and we cannot rely on long term memory. There are certain topics that you need to revise just before the exam, so be clear about that. Apart from that, yes, stress management is also very important given that we only have 3 weeks before our main starts. So more than more than the number of hours you put in, you need to do the right things and you need to be confident that yes, you are working in the right direction. Because I believe that if we are stressed, we will not be able to give our best in the exam. So that works with forestry also. If you go with a stressed mind, then you might not be able to recall the things that you actually could have written if you were a bit relaxed. So yeah, you just need to work on that bit. Now, like stress management for some of you could come through like exercising or meditating. So just make a like put these things also in your schedule in the next few weeks. Now coming to what needs to be done during the exam. So like just reiterating the basics that we need to like compulsorily have we need to solve question number 1 and question number 5 in the exam, and out of the remaining we need to choose one question from each section. So these are the basics that you should not miss and like just not uh, forget them in a exam situation. Then coming to how to choose questions. For me, I did not go with any preconceived notion that I need to be solving more questions from section A or section B. I used to decide then and there, depending on like what I knew the best, even if it was from section A, which was a more technical, or from section B, which was more theoretical. I would like actually calculate at that point of time very logically. For example, in question number 4, I do not know a question which is worth 15 marks, but in another question, I do not know which is worth 5 marks, then I would choose the latter one, obviously. So, like, without being very attached to any topic or like anything, I would just choose the question very logically, depending on how many marks were allocated to that. And another thing that I would like to mention is to stick to what you have already practiced. There is this thing like that people talk about, that we should be using colored pens for diagrams or colored pens in the forestry optional. It's good if you're able to use that. It's okay if you're not able to use that, but like use colored pens or different colored pens only if you have practiced it before. I personally did not use. I only used the blue pen in my examination, and that worked for me. So if you have practiced different colored pens, very well go ahead with that. If not, please do not try in the actual examination. Um, yeah. We'll move to the next slide later. Yeah. Now coming to the second optional. So for me, my second optional was chemistry, which was common with the civil services optional. So for those of you who are in a similar situation, I would advise that the first, like you would have already done that, but just reiterating that please go through the syllabus of your civil services optional and forest services optional carefully, because at least in chemistry, there are a few chapters that are not there in civil services, but there in forest services main. So we do not want to miss them, like the statistical thermodynamics or polymers. There are 3, 4 themes that are entirely missing. So please figure out if there are any additional topics and do cover them. Because again, UPSC has a habit of asking questions from those topics, especially which are not common. Again, and then like PYQs form the heart and soul of our preparation, even in civil services or forest services. So do go through the paper pattern here also. And with respect to choosing questions, I'll just take a minute for those of you who have the chemistry optional. So for paper 2, the questions tend to be very lengthy, since in organic chemistry we have very big structures, and like the paper might be of 8 to 10 pages, and it might become difficult for you to choose which questions we actually know. So for this, what I used to do in the paper was I would take 5 minutes in the starting. I would write down at the end of the paper 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is the question numbers. And in front of that, I would write down like the marks that I do not know for each question. So in chemistry paper 2, the questions are broken down into very small parts, 5 marks, and there are like 8 subparts in some questions. So that will help you logically select the questions where you know the maximum and where you do not know the maximum. And again, here also you need to have a very clear plan of what you need to revise then, whether it needs revision 2 days before the exam or whether it needs revision right before the exam. So uh, please plan that accordingly. And again, for the science optionals, if a scientific calculator is needed, please do not forget to carry it. Because I remember that last year during the mains, especially for chemistry, there was a very high requirement of the scientific calculator, even more than what we needed in the civil services optional. So not taking it would be like a very big blunder on your part. So just keep it in your bag a day before itself. We'll move to the next slide now. Yeah, moving ahead from optionals and coming to general English paper, which is of 300 marks. So I believe that most of you would have seen the pattern of the paper. I've mentioned it on the left-hand side of the screen, that essay, letter, report, all these things are there. I would just like talk a little bit about each of these components so that you are able to like develop a strategy for yourself. General English and general knowledge are two papers which do not need a lot of time, but I very strongly believe that even if you like put in bare minimum effort, they will pay off. So it's always advisable to work a little bit, and it's okay if most of you have not yet started on these subjects. Even I started in the month of November, so that's entirely fine. And I was able to score pretty well in general English at least. So for essay, what I did was I went through the previous year papers of forest services names. I wrote down the topics of essays of all the years, say let's say 10 years. And then I did some analysis. I figured out that there are certain themes here which are repeated. It's not very philosophical like the civil services essay. It's mostly it can be tackled from our GS content. So I just like listed down certain themes that are being repeatedly asked. Let's say something on population, or something on sports, or something on, let's say, the economy of India. So certain themes, or women is a topic, elderly care is a topic. So I identified these themes, and then instead of preparing content on them like from the scratch, I went back to my GS notes of civil services, where I already had notes for these. I extracted whatever relevant data or whatever relevant things were there, noted them down at one place so that it's easier for me to revise before the examination. So in essay in the forest services mains, we need to like be very simplistic in how we are writing. It doesn't have to be very fancy, or a lot of quotes and all are not needed. You just need to be very logical in the flow, like cover all the different aspects that could be there, different dimensions of the essay. Like last year, I wrote the one on demographic dividend and senior, something related to the elderly population. So you can cover different aspects of that, and like be very simple in your English, be grammatically correct. We do not want to make grammatical errors here. So that is the preparation that can be done, and it will just take a few hours. Like first step would be to analyze the topic and then just extract whatever data you already have for your civil services mains. Now for letter writing. Letter writing also, again, go back to the previous year papers. Letters are also asked on standard themes only, like a formal letter would have to be written to the wildlife conservator or to the editor of a newspaper. So just identify them, and then like have your format ready. That is mentioned on the next slide. I will just show you after we close this. And also what I did was I prepared certain keywords for my letter, like in my humble opinion, or these phrases and keywords that are there, which you can put in any letter that is there. So that eased out the process for me. I will show you in the next slide. Then coming, yeah, if we can just move to the next slide once, then we'll come back. So this is something which I did for the essay. Like I wrote down the topics and then I identified the themes. Waste management is one. Environment related things they tend to ask on a regular basis. So just keep your content ready for these. Then on the right image, I have mentioned like some keywords, like I want to express my deep concern, or gravity of the situation, or bringing normalcy. So these are keywords which you can find readily online, and like these will help you frame a better letter when you are writing it. Like I have also mentioned on this page that through the columns of your esteemed newspaper, I would like to draw your attention. So this is what I prepared like beforehand only, and whatever topic I would get in the exam, I would readily fit in the content into this format. So this is the background work that you can do for essay and letter. For report, what I did was, again, I went back to the previous year questions. I identified that what all themes are there. If they're asking about the problems in rural schools or rural villages or healthcare centers. For this, I practiced 2 to 3. Yeah, I practiced 2 to 3 report writing. And what I would do is I would brainstorm the different components that could be there. For example, if you are writing the problems in a rural health facility, so on what all levels the problems could be there, whether like the cleanliness is not there, or let's say there are not enough doctors there are not enough equipment there, the management is not proper. So it will be a nice idea that you just brainstorm different dimensions that could be there. So I did that for 2, 3 previous year questions. That can be done for report writing. Now comes the part essay writing, which most people find difficult. Yes, it can be a bit tricky, and out of the entire general English syllabus, I practiced essay the most. So for this, what needs to be done is that you need to be very thorough with the rules that are there for press A. For example, you do not have to write a heading that is mentioned in the exam. Then you have to write it in one paragraph, or the tense that you have to use. Or there is a rule that you do not mention the examples or the exaggerated statements that are there in the essay. So, like, go through some YouTube videos where they're explaining about what are the rules that one must adhere to while writing press A, and like just list them down, and also practice a few of these. So instead of like practicing random content that is there on the web, I went through the previous year papers only. I solved around three of them, and like cut them down into one third of the original length, like repeated the entire process three times. And by the end, I was able to form a strategy for myself of how I would address this. Like the first step would be to go through the entire thing. Then the second step would be I would identify what is the basic essence. What are they trying to communicate through that uh, essay that they have mentioned. The third thing would be that I would mark down the important arguments. So most of the times it happens that the argument is just one or two lines, and then there is an elaboration, some exaggeration, some example that they have mentioned. So I would mark down the important arguments, and then the fourth step would be to like reframe those arguments in my own words, because in Presley we do not have to pick the sentences right from the content that is given in the page. So this you will be able to figure out only if you practice. So if you have paucity of time, or if you're running short on time, I would advise that do practice essay, because like that will really help you in the examination. Then coming to the grammar section. So grammar, like covering grammar can be again very tricky for most of us. For this, I adopted a bottom-up approach instead of like trying to go through all the idioms that are there on the web. What I did was that one day I would like pick up this theme that I'm going to study the idioms today. So I would go through the last 10-year papers, and then I would list down all the idioms that have been asked. I would try to solve them. So I created a repository sorts of myself. Then similarly, another day I would like figure out making adjective theme. Then I would like go through the past 10-year papers and like actually try to solve them, all of them. And while solving all of them, I would also identify that most of them are repeated, or there are just two, three rules that are there to make adjectives. That would become very clear. Similarly, I did that with other type of questions that I asked. So instead of like putting a lot of effort in this, I went in a bottom-up manner. I solved each of these questions. I focused a lot on PYQs, and also revised it 2-3 times before the exam. So that is what I did for grammar. Yeah, we will now move on to the next part. Yeah, just coming here. In this page, in the report writing, as I mentioned, that I identified the themes of various years. They're asking on renewable energy, or and on the right hand side, as I have mentioned, that there was this question in 2022 where like you had to write about the learning in rural schools. So I actually brainstormed in this manner, wrote down all the dimensions, and this gave me confidence that I will be able to elaborate on these bits in my report writing. Now we will move on to the next slide, which is the strategy for general knowledge. As you might be aware that the general knowledge paper here is actually a combination of GS 1, 2, and 3 for our civil services mains. So it does not need a lot of preparation. It only needs some smart study. The first thing which I would like to mention is the pattern of the paper. So here we have 6 blocks which have 4 questions each. So in all, we have 24 questions. In civil services, we only have 20 questions. Here we have 24 questions, but there's no need to be afraid of this fact, because like here we have 2 pages for each question. So in all, we have around 48 pages of space for Forest Services mains, and in the Civil Services there are 50 pages. So if that gives peace to all of you, that here we have to write lesser number of pages. Also, since the pages that are allocated for 15 markers and 10 markers are the same, that is 2 each, you need to be aware that you are writing more content in 15 markers. Say, let's say in the 15 markers, you're filling end to end 2 pages. So in the 10 markers, it can be around 1.75 pages. Don't do don't reverse this thing. Be careful that you're writing more in the 15 markers because they carry a higher word limit and have a higher weightage. Then coming to the different themes that are there. So for this, okay, we'll just move on to the next page, sir. Even for this, what I did was, since very clear cut, there are 6 blocks. So I picked up history as a theme, and then I would go back to all the previous year questions that are there. I actually listed them down. What 4 questions have been asked each year? Then I highlighted. So what are the themes that they are asking? So history is so vast. We study it in so much depth for our civil services. But here, like since all the subjects are clubbed into one paper only, we do not have that much time and does not make sense to put in that much effort. So I did a very strategic study. I identified what themes are being asked. So you need to prepare certain content on Ashoka, Akbar, they are repetitively asked. And then you need to study, let's say, Mughal Empire or Sangam period or Harsha age. All these things are repeatedly asked. So why not like just go back to your notes and revise only these parts? So, and like the best strategy would be to go through the previous year questions yourself so that like you get a better idea of where are the things you are lacking or what are the things which you did not cover that well in civil services, let's say medieval history, but it is asked here. So like just do that analysis for yourself. It will take only 1 hour for one subject, and then you can have a plan for yourself what you need to revise. Similarly for economy, as I've mentioned there, what are the questions that they're asking? They're mostly going into the basics, the twin balance sheet, the depreciation, or the financial inclusion thing, digital economy maybe asked. So identify these themes and just revise those, that content or collect your data for those topics. If we move to the next page, in polity, yeah, in polity, they mostly asked about the static part. So you need to have content about your preamble, secularism, basic structure, DPSP. So these are the things which these guys would focus on in the forest services mains. So it's better to have an introduction ready or a conclusion ready for these themes. Like here, less focus is there on current affairs, unlike the civil services mains. So these are the themes that you need to identify. Then the 4th block is geography, environment section. For this, you can again go back to your civil services notes if you appeared for that means soil erosion, overpopulation. Like these are the themes which you need to focus on. We'll move to the next page, sir. Then the 5th block is forest and agriculture. Forestry part would be covered if you already have your forestry optional. Apart from that, like themes like organic farming or zero budget natural farming, these are things that we have already studied. But the idea is that if you go through the previous year questions and analyze them, you will be able to revise more effectively. And again, like have those things ready in your head when you are asked to write them, it will become very easy. Now coming to science and tech questions. So yes, science and tech questions are a bit tricky here. Like there could be certain bouncer questions as well, but you don't have to panic from that. Like last year also there was a question on hologram, which like most of us did not know how to write, or there was a very specific question on the quantum mission. So these are certain things we don't have to worry a lot about. Yes, for science and tech, you can go through the topics which are in news, but like cover the current affairs and prepare certain themes on that. But like spending more time on that, I don't think it makes sense. Given, like, even if you put in a lot of effort, they might ask something which is completely random. And like, one thing that you need to remember is if you do not know it, other people probably also don't know it. So in this case, my strategy was to only write what I know. And if I did not know that question, I would not try to like bluff, or I would not try to write things because I knew I would not be rewarded for that. So instead, I allotted that time to any other question in any other section where I knew better. So for science and tech, we need to be very careful about the cost benefit analysis. We'll move to the next slide now. Hmm. So this was like some details paper wise. Now there are certain things that I would like to mention, given we only have like 3 weeks before the examination, that it's okay to like not study a lot, or not. Some of you might be facing this problem that you are not as efficient as you were during the civil services means. It's completely fine. What we need to focus on, that we are putting in those 7-8 hours every day, and like just be consistent in these last few days. It's okay if you're not able to do a lot, but study less, but do the right things. If revision is important, then do it uh, thoroughly. Like, I believe that for forestry, revision is very, very important. So even if you're spending 2 hours a day on something, let that be revision. Let that be your practice. Uh, so for forest means it's okay to do less, but ensure that you're putting in your time and your efforts and your energy in the right things. Additionally, one thing that I like adopted last year was these smart breaks, as I like to call them now. Uh, so I used to go for my evening walks daily, and there I did not play any music or anything, but I would carefully observe whatever is there around me. So in forestry, you have studied certain features like buttressing or fluting, or why the trees are bent towards this side. So during that 30 minutes walk, I would actually observe whatever is there, and that would like sort of strengthen my concepts in my head. Or I would try to like just recall the name. If it is neem, then what is the scientific name of that? So something of this sort, which actually made it interesting for me. Like also getting right now, it's not the time to go out for a walk, at least in Delhi, because of the pollution. But yeah, some things of this sort can be done for people who are at other places. Also, like staying in the right company has been very important for me in my journey. Uh, if you feel that something is important for you, if there is something where you need to put in effort, please put that. And you do not have to listen to what others are saying, that something like कि इंग्लिश कौन ही पढ़ता है, या फिर जीके के लिए तो क्या ही पढ़ना है. If you feel that you will be more confident if you put in those 4-5 hours in that subject, or if you like practice the entire paper of English once, or you actually write a full length test, please do that. Please do not listen to anyone who's just trying to say that it doesn't need to be done. If you feel it is right for you, please do that. And also, like, we do not want to feel underconfident in these last few days. So please make sure that the people that you're surrounded with only boost your morale up and do not drain your energy. And finally, as I mentioned before, it is very important to stay confident. If you're confident, you will be able to give your 100% in the exam. It's okay if you have not studied everything, or like if you have not been able to implement the ideal plan that you created for yourself. But if you will be stressed, you will be able to give only 60-70%. There's no point of that. Our objective is to give our best with whatever we have studied till now. So being confident and being happy will be the way for that. And all the very best for your mains. And I'm sure that you guys will do very well. So I'm done from my end. Yeah, we can have any questions.
Anyone, please, if you have any questions, you can very well ask in the comment box.
there is this question on Pressay that if I wrote it in a single paragraph or different paragraph, as per the rules that I had read online, it needs to be written in a single paragraph. So you can go through that and like work on that. Yeah, I had already mentioned that there are 2 pages for both 15 and 10 markers. So I made sure that I filled the 2 pages of 15 markers from end to end. I would also try to do that for the 10 markers, but in some of the questions, I only wrote till 1.75 pages, and that would be fine. And with respect to the new word limit here, I for me it was not necessary to like practice a lot. It's more about like sticking to the structure, the intro, body, and writing the relevant points as to what the question is. Uh, so just focus on your content more, and I think the word limit should be fine. As long as you are like filling in those pages, 2 pages for the 15 markers and around 1.75 for the 10 markers. Okay, how much of the syllabus did you complete before mains and how much syllabus after mains? So I think that Kritika's question is like how much syllabus before the civil services mains and how much after that. So I had mentioned before that after the civil services mains got over last year, around 25th of September, I took a break of 4-5 days and started my preparation for the forest services mains from the scratch from October. So that was the first time I actually went to the forestry syllabus. So the entire strategy that I have mentioned is what I did in these 2 months only. And the things that I've mentioned you can do now are actually what I did last year in the month of November. With respect to the diagrams, uh, it's like yeah, for forestry optional diagrams are a bonus if you are able to draw them. It's not important to draw them in every question. Obviously, like only in the relevant question if there is a like question on soil conservation, so there a diagram cannot be drawn. But if there is something on shelter belts or windbreaks, for that we have very nice like pyramidal diagrams to explain. So that will be good. I had not done that last year, but if you feel the need, then like you can extract the relevant diagrams in one place and have another 10 pages of short notes for that, like you are doing for definitions also and scientific names also. Uh, and do practice them before the exam, because if you have not practiced enough, it will not come naturally and you will not be able to write them in the exam. Okay, so I scored 252 marks in forestry optional, and in general English I had 179 marks, as someone is asking. In GK paper I had 104 marks. Is it necessary to fill all the pages? Uh, Okay, so in the forestry optional, like I mentioned that the introduction should be mostly definition or whatever relevant thing is there. Conclusion is not mandatory, but if you are able to write something, it is obviously better. And for this, I mentioned that my outline thing really helped me. So if there is a question on one section of a question, I was able to like relate it to what comes next in that chapter. So I was able to give a forward-looking introduction, forward-looking conclusion in those questions. Or if some question on agroforestry is asked or joint forest management is asked, then probably you can mention some best practice that is there, or like these sort of things can be mentioned to get more marks. Uh, okay, so yes, you need to be very careful of the time. In GK, especially like since there are 6 blocks, what I did was I planned that I would spend 30 minutes on each of the blocks. But what happened in the actual paper was that since there was one question which I did not know in science and tech, I saved time from there and allocated it to different questions which I knew well. I knew the question on Harsha well, so I spent time on that. You need to be mindful of the time, but for me it was not a very big problem given that we already had a lot of practice in the civil services. With respect to this question by Aman, that how early could you complete the paper? So our objective is not to complete the paper 10 minutes before, because in those 10 minutes, some other people would be writing something more in the paper. So we need to be precise, maybe 1 or 2 minutes before the time limit. But yes, we need to have it such that we are able to give our best in those 3 hours. I do not have a Telegram channel. I can go through the short notes that I prepared, but again, a better idea would be to actually go through that process on your own, depending on the things that you find difficult to remember. Like, note them down on one place and try to remember it on your own. So that will be more beneficial for all of you. Like, even with respect to analyzing the previous year questions for essay or history or all these sections, it would be good if you identify those trends and then pick up themes which you are not very good at or which you need revision. So that would be a better. Okay, there's one question that someone is a fresher. Who can I? If you're preparing only for forest services and if you are writing the next year's exam, I assume, then yeah, starting with the optionals can be a good thing. Like covering the syllabus at least once can be something that can be done. In addition to the prelims preparation, because here in prelims also you need a high score compared to the civil services exam. I think that I've already covered the forestry revision strategy. In the paper 1, I attempted 3 questions from section B. In paper 2, I attempted 3 questions from section A. Section A is more technical in forestry and section B is a bit more generalistic. So I did not go with any fixated thing in my head that I would attempt questions from this section or that section. I entirely relied on what was asked and how much I knew, like doing the best in the given circumstances.
Okay, Prachi, again, thank you. It was a wonderful session.
No problem, sir. It was my pleasure. I will be glad if some of you are able to pick some things from this and actually implement it in your exam.
Okay, some one extra question is there.
Yes. Yes, there are topics of environment, soil that are common in civil services mains and forestry. So for those topics, I relied on my civil services notes only. I did not prepare anything else. So my whole strategy was about maximizing the return on whatever time I was putting in. If there is some topic that I have already covered in civil services mains, I would just like go through that content, extract it at one place, and then just revise that. There are topics like pollution also here, environment, degradation, watershed management. These are things which we have already done. So why not utilize them now?
That's wonderful. Thank you, Prachi, again. And thank you everyone for joining the session and all the very best for the upcoming examination.